Hey guys, so this is just going to be a quick video going over chapter 5. We will go over this in class tomorrow, but I wanted to make sure that you guys had kind of a preloaded video so that if you did not show up to class, you would have all the information you need. So our warm-up today is brain damage that leaves a person capable of understanding speech, but with an impaired ability to produce speech, meaning they can't talk. Most likely indicates injury in which of the following areas. All right, so we have the basal ganglia, Wernicke's area, the substantiated Niagara, or the Broca's area. All right, we talked about this last week. So A and C are out. It is either Wernicke's area or Broca's area. Remember, Wernicke's area is where they don't understand it and they can't speak it, but they don't know that they can't do it, so they're not, unhappy. Remember, in Broca's area, they can understand it, they just can't do it. So they can comprehend what other people say, they just can't produce speech themselves. All right, so the correct area is going to be D, that's Broca's area. All right, this week I did the PowerPoint a little bit different because you guys are doing the reading. You should be doing the reading yourself so that you're able to see, everything in the chapter. I am not going to do PowerPoints where it covers everything in the reading. For one thing, you guys should be doing the reading, not depending on me to do it for you. All right, so I'm doing this a little bit differently to kind of cover some of the key areas. But you guys, again, you're going to have to just do the reading yourself. It's not super, super long, and you can probably get most of it done pretty quickly. But there is a quiz in there that you have to do. So, that's something you have to do regardless. This week, you're covering Unit 5. There is a Unit 5 test at the end. You have the reading quiz to start with, then the video, and then an apply, and then the exam. So it's pretty standard. This is about what we have every week. So you should be familiar with that. All right. In the chapter, I'm going to start adding the key terms in there because these are super, super important for you guys to be able to look at these key terms and be able to use them and understand them. When you take the AP test, for those of you that are taking it, you're going to have to be able to understand what the question is asking you, and you're going to have to be able to use some of this vocabulary to explain your side of, whatever the question is asking. So you need to be looking at this vocabulary and you need to be using it. So every week I'll put this up here just so you guys know what vocabulary needs to be covered. There is actually a section at the very end of your reading text, the very last section. It does include vocabulary on there and you can click on each one and know what it is. But that's a way for you to work on that. There are also Quizlets and quizzes that you can do that have the vocabulary in there for you to practice. That may be something I start adding into the course for you. I'll look into doing that if it helps. Some key people. So we have David Hubble, Torsten Wiesel, Ernst Weber, Gustav Fechner, and Eleanor Gibson. So those are just some people that we're going to talk about in the unit. Make sure, again, that you're reading. So today's chapter 5, that's perceiving mind, sensation, and perception. This is a full unit from AP, so make sure that you're looking at this. Section 1, I probably am going to take this out, but it starts with, how does sensation lead to perception? So we're going to start with how do you see? So here is an overview of the eye. You have the cornea, you have the pupil, the iris, the lens. We have blood vessels throughout the eye, optic disc, fovea, and the retina. Now remember, the eyeball is a gelatinous part of your body, meaning that it's fluid filled. So that's one of the things that is unique about the eye. We also, if you've ever been to an eye doctor, it's kind of interesting because they can look at your eye and take a picture of it and get kind of a real overview of if you have health issues. So they can tell if you have high cholesterol, diabetes, they can tell, a lot of different conditions from your eye. So it is very important to know that. The book covers kind of how light waves travel and how your eye actually sees. The distance between two peaks, are the wavelengths, obviously, and then we have the visual spectrum. So you can look at that, read about it in the book. It tells you even more. It's kind of interesting. The only part of your body that does this is your eye. But when you see something and it goes into your brain, it actually flips over. So when it gets on the back of your eye, it actually is totally reversed. So that's just the way that the lens and the light are reflected in there. It just kind of reverses it, and then it goes through the optic nerve to your brain. Okay. There are some conditions that it talks about that go along with the eye. We're not going to get into a lot of those just because, they don't really make much difference for psychology, but you do have to have a basic understanding of this stuff. All right. Next, we talk about the ear. So how do you hear? You have the different structures like the pinea, the auditory canal, tympanic membrane, the eustachian tube, the cochlea, the auditory nerve, which is very deep in your ear. We have the oval window, which also helps with hearing. We have the ossicles, and then there is the bone in there. If you've ever seen, there's some new types of headphones that you can get that actually set on the bone in front of your ear, and produce that radiates sound along the bone rather than sticking it in your ear. That's how that can do that, because the bone is right there, and it can radiate sound along it just like your ear can. Your ear is broken up into three parts. You have the outer ear, which goes all the way up to the tympanic membrane. You have the middle ear, and then you have the inner ear, which is the very inside of your ear. Okay. Most hearing is done in the middle and the inner ear. I know I have a lot of ear problems, have my entire life. I have this thing where the eustachian tube, which is like a draining tube, mine is really small and tends to get blocked up. When I was a children, I had tubes in my ears several times, chronic ear infections, that kind of thing. What that is literally where they go in and put a hole in the membrane in between your ear, and they put like a draining tube in there. Now, most of the time that's done on smaller children, and those tubes fall out and that heals. So that being said, that's not really something that they do nowadays. They just try to be more careful. I don't know that I've heard of them doing that in years, but in the 1980s, that was something that they did pretty regularly, which was when I was a small child. Okay, so in here we have some different pictures dealing with how the brain processes sound. It goes to the auditory cortex, or the secondary auditory cortex, which is deep inside your brain. It is in the center, in the in between the frontal lobe, temporal lobe, and the parietal and occipital. It is literally in the middle part of your brain. We have wavelengths up here. People hear at different wavelengths depending on your ability to hear. Because I had a lot of ear infections as a child, I have a slightly smaller hearing range. I have a really hard time hearing men's voices that are low, which is really bad because my husband tends to talk really low sometimes. He just has a naturally quiet voice. So because that pitch is so low, it's very, very hard for me to hear. Especially out of my right ear, that seems to be the worst ear. And my mom is actually almost totally deaf in that ear. And I have an uncle that's almost totally deaf as well. So I have a family with a lot of hearing problems. Now, in the bottom left here is a graph that talks about the different decibels or intensities of different types of sounds. So the threshold of hearing is 0 decibels. Rustling leaves would be about 10. Normal conversation is about 60 decibels. Street traffic would be about 70. Water falling over Niagara would be about 90. And a rock concert would be about 110 decibels. Interestingly enough, standard earbuds actually are at 100 decibels. That's almost as much as you would get at a rock concert with nothing to protect your ears. Okay, so be careful when you're using earbuds because that can actually damage your hearing if they are too loud. All right. Next, we have a kind of a graph that tells you at what level the hearing is based on like decibels and wavelengths and things like that, where you can hear. So we have earthquakes are at the bottom. We have human hearing is kind of in that mid to upper range. Dogs actually hear a wider range into almost the ultrasound range. Birds, frogs, dolphins are way up there. They have that much, much higher range, which if you've ever heard dolphins, call to each other, you could definitely tell they have that higher range, higher pitch. So this is just kind of a fun little chart to see where hearing lies and the different species where theirs is at. Humans are, like I said, right in this area, kind of in between the blue and the orange. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what's going on. So the next section in the book is talking about how you feel. Oh, there was one thing I meant to talk about. I'm sorry. I'll go back. So when we're talking about hearing, we also have a lack of hearing, where we have people that are totally deaf or profoundly deaf. When that happens, there are a couple of different options. If it happens when people are really young, like they have had hearing and then they do not have hearing now, you can have what's called a cochlear implant, which is something that goes on. They do a surgery and it goes behind the ear, usually right in this area, or maybe up above. I think it's up here, depending on how old they are when they do it. But they usually have a piece that goes here. And what it is like a magnet, and it basically works just like your cochlea would before the hearing was damaged. Okay. Now that's one option, or you have the option of using sign language like ASL or something similar. Now, there are different versions of sign language throughout the world, and they are all unique. What's interesting about sign language is there's a whole culture that surrounds the deaf community. So you don't have just deaf people, you have a deaf community and a deaf culture. And that is a whole different thing than the hearing culture. Okay, so when we talk about deaf or deafness or profound hearing loss, things like that, that's a whole community within itself. And there's a lot of interesting things that go on around that. There's whole schools that only, cater to deaf people. There are whole universities. Gallaudet University is 100% for deaf people, or hard of hearing. So they have their own community, and that is something that you have to make sure that you're aware of if you are doing any kind of research or dealing specifically with the deaf. That's one thing. And most deaf people do not like the cochlear. They don't want anything to do with it. They don't want to talk about it. They think it is, an affront to them, because then you're not within the deaf community again. Okay, so that's just something, a little side note about that. So how do we feel? This is talking about pain receptors and touch. They have something called somatic sensation. That is how the body senses touch, skin, temperature, pain, all of that. And that goes through mainly touching. And they show you this little breakdown of skin receptors. it's interesting because it's very similar to like other parts of the body where different things are on different levels. So you'll have a pain receptor in one place, you'll have a pleasure receptor in one place, a cold receptor in one place, a hot receptor. Those are all in different places on the skin. All right. So you don't actually feel it all in the same place. So that's something that you should be aware of. Also, pain. The book does cover kind of how pain works. So in here you have the event or injury. Say you break your arm. So you break your arm, then it opens into, the spinal cord, and then that transfers the, pain to other parts of the body. So factors that open the gate are like chronic stress, pain. Factors that close the gate would be something like rubbing the elbow, high levels of arousal. You could have pain medication. Those things are going to shut the gate so that the pain goes off. And then you also have pain is experienced depending on how far the gate is open or closed. So think about it like this. So an event happens and you're injured. The gate is open. Well, it depends how much the gate is open as to how much you will feel that. If the gate is only open a little bit, like, oh, I just banged my elbow, dang it. And that means it's only open a little bit. But if it's something like a break or a surgery or something more severe, then the gate's going to be wide open. Now, the things that are going to close the gate are when you rub your elbow if you hurt it, that's going to ease the pain. Maybe, lifting your leg and putting it up to where the blood won't be going downwards. Things like that are going to close it, and that's going to help determine how long the pain lasts. Okay. And then, of course, you have pain receptors that you can use with medication. All right. How do we smell and taste? So interestingly enough, smell and taste are very connected. Your ability to smell is also your ability to taste. If you can't taste anything, you can't smell anything. And vice versa. If you can't smell anything, you can't taste anything. So it's very interesting. Those things are very well connected. This is a picture of, just showing you how that works. Definitely look at that closer. There's a image of it in your book. Taste, when we look at that, we have the tongue, which has the papilla, and then we have the taste buds, then we have the microvilla. We also have some supporting cell and taste receptors, and then we have cranial nerves. So that's in there as well. And then it shows you a cross section of it, just so that you're aware. I didn't want to get too much into tasting and smelling because it's not covered very much in the book. Mainly vision and hearing are the big ones. If you're watching the recording, make sure that you get the ClassKick link. I will put that on the Sway so that you have it. That is extra credit. So if you do that and turn it in, I will give you extra credit, and that will be added to your grade at the end of the semester. All right, guys, that is it for today. I just wanted to let you know I have office hours Thursday. So if you have any questions, just let me know, and I'll be happy to chat with you. Have a great day, guys.